Today, we're going to talk about how to leverage employee advocacy with gamification in Powell 365. Gamification works because it triggers real, powerful human emotions. These are positive user experiences, and these positive user experiences lead to better engagement, loyalty, and higher sales. The benefits of employee advocacy go beyond marketing. It also contributes positively to employee engagement, giving a customer-facing voice to each employee and the ability to contribute to company development, help build unity and reinforce the sense of belonging. So today we have our speakers. We have Anthony McGinnis, our Senior Solutions Engineer at Powell Software. Anthony has nearly a decade of digital workplace and collaboration experience across IT, pharmaceutical, and educational sectors. He's worked on large-scale SCCM, SharePoint, Teams, and Skype deployments and understands the holistic support that the future of work requires. Here at Powell Software, he focuses on user experience and employee enablement to drive technology adoption and grow our digital workforce. Today, we also have Eric, the President and Chief Strategy Officer of StitchDX. Eric is the President for StitchDX, a digital experience agency based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and a premier Powell Software partner. Eric has over 20 years of experience leading digital technology and creative design for some of the world's premier brands, including Apple, NBC, Universal, Lowe's, Barnes & Noble's, Target, and Verizon. Eric applies experience and insights from organizational development, including corporate leadership, communication, and teamwork to craft transformative digital employee experiences. His approach has helped global enterprises and SMBs engage, empower, and enable their in-office and remote workforce with a user-centric, design thinking-based approach to discovery, design, and development. These two gentlemen are going to walk us through some incredible ideas and reasons why you should be leveraging employee advocacy within your organization. Anthony will kick us off by telling everyone about Powell Software, and Eric will continue with StitchDX. I'm handing this off to you, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thanks, Caleb.
Really appreciate that. Thanks everyone for joining, and yes, I'd love to go ahead and just start out by introducing Powell Software. Powell Software is a digital workplace leading company that's really trying to push usability and compelling digital workplace experiences for organizations and their user base. As far as the breadth of what Powell Software across the world, we have 10 offices, over 300 customers, and 1.5 million users. A large partner network, as well as a large growth as we've seen even go more exponential during these hard times with the pandemic and COVID. And recently we did take a $16 million round showing the growth and the movement that we're making towards the digital innovation, some of which we will be going over today. Eric, I'll hand off to you.
Thanks, Anthony. So StitchDX is a digital experience agency, and our focus is not only on the employee experience, but also on the customer experience. So we kind of handle both sides of things, where our focus is really on helping organizations to take their brand promise and enable and empower their employees to make sure that they can deliver on it and ensure that they can engage and retain and grow their customers with it. As Kayla mentioned, we're a premier Powell partner here based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and we have expertise in intranets, SharePoint, and Microsoft Teams, and really tying together the whole collaboration spectrum. And we do leverage design thinking based methodologies around discovery and implementation to help create a user experience that your employees and your customers will love. So Anthony, you and I talked a little bit about what we were going to be talking about today beforehand, and I think it probably is a good idea just to share with everyone that our goal here, our plan here, is to be more of a conversation around what's happening, what we're seeing right now, particularly with what's happening around this whole work from home environment that we're in, and the future of work from home is not going away. We all know that. We've heard lots about that. And so it's going to be mostly conversation. And then we're going to show you how this actually works in real life. Anthony's going to walk through a quick little demo for us. So, Anthony, you're working from home out in Seattle. I'm working from home here in Boston. We're on the opposite ends of the country, but and I can't seem to move forward here. Maybe you can move me forward here in the deck. All of a sudden, I don't have control.
Sorry, yeah.
The advocacy, and as I mentioned earlier on, I have experience on both sides of the fence, right, on the customer side as well as the employee side. And we looked at all the data, and the reality is that employee advocacy is such a critical part of organizational success. And if organizations aren't looking at this more, they should be, because the reality is that your employees are better and more connected in social and really everywhere than the organization can possibly be, right? So, people trust their connections, their direct connections. They don't necessarily trust the voice of the business to tell them that they're the best, but they do trust the people that maybe work there, people that have had experience working there, to sort of talk about the value and the benefit of the business. Employees are social, they're connected, they're on LinkedIn, they're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, they're on, all these different places. And you may not be thinking about Facebook as probably most of us are B2B that are listening to this right now, but if you're B2C, that's an important place to be, right? And so, the fact that you've got this incredible reach within your own workforce, you should be leveraging that and using that. And we know that salespeople that use social, whether it's pushing content out from their own site or pushing third-party content out, tend to drive a lot more sales and a lot more business, because they're out there, they're sharing things that are valuable and relevant. And this last stat is probably the most relevant, and from a marketing perspective is the most exciting, right? The fact that leads that are developed by employees, by their own social, tends to convert 7 times more than leads that are driven by a company's own social. It's not rocket science, but it is kind of eye-opening, right? That this is that leads that are driven by your employees are going to convert more. So this is why it's really, really important to be thinking about advocacy. But of course, there are challenges, right? There are challenges to getting your own employees to drive that advocacy. And one of the challenges is that advocacy is really a function of engagement, right? And so when we talk about the digital workplace and how important the digital workplace is from a communication standpoint, from a connectivity standpoint, it's also really important from an engagement standpoint. And I know that engagement's one of those words that gets thrown around an awful lot. And we've been talking about engagement for years and years and years. But today, where we are, and everyone's working from home, I'm at home, Anthony's at home, Kayla's at home, most of you listening to this right now are at home. And so, when we're all disjointed and disconnected and we're all in our own space, that becomes really important. Anthony, I don't know if you had anything you want to throw in there too.
No, absolutely. I think for me, when I think of advocacy and engagement with your employee base, it really comes down to many times for the organization, it's almost like it's on the onus is on the employee. And I think it's really a mutual engagement between both. You want the organization to have the opportunity to build advocacy and have something to advocate. And on the employee side, you want that engagement level. And you want, as you've mentioned with a lot of the statistics that are up, one of the biggest ones that calls out to me is social media. And the biggest part with that is we're all using it. And very many times what you're going through and ways you find out about companies, organizations, or things that are happening are going to be through your modes of social. And many factors. Now, we think of that purely from just news and things that may be happening from the organization or to get your name out there, but also with leads and, as you mentioned, the opportunity to bring in sales or even talent. People typically go from references where they're recommended and what they hear from people that are already from that organization. I think that's a really big factor. And
You're
of
right.
course, we're talking right now from this hybrid model where a lot of people are working from home. We don't expect that to change, but there will be a time when people are going back to work. But this model and this mentality will not go away. And you
You're
can
right.
really build the best practices now instead of waiting and just going back. You can build them now so that they hold up. And when we're back in the office, when people are back on premises, so you're going to still have that mode built out, and people will keep that culture alive and keep building that and enabling and bringing in that advocacy, which is really good on both sides for the employee and the organization.
Yeah, you're right. And it's funny. I was talking to somebody else about this, and this idea of advocacy being like, hey, the sort of the
Absolutely.
onus is on the employee because they're the advocates, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about how advocacy really is not a spectator sport, right? You can't just
Exactly.
have employees and then just expect them to go out and talk good about your business, right?
Right.
Or speak well of it, I should say, not talk good. Speak well about your business, and to really be the advocates around the vision and the mission and the benefits of the products and services that you're offering. You have to have something for them to go out and share that, and that's a big part of this. We talked about engagement, right? And how I think advocacy really is a function of engagement. Employee
Absolutely.
engagement is so important. And I work with a lot of different organizations, big ones, small ones, here in the United States and in Europe as well. And what I hear from them, business leaders, business owners, managers, almost all of them are saying the same thing. Engagement is critically important, but if you ask them, what does that mean? How do I drive engagement? How do I measure that engagement? It gets a lot muddier, right? The conversation becomes a lot more difficult. But engagement is important. And here's something that I thought was shocking. Now, this is a US based survey, but Gallup has been measuring engagement for 20 years. Since the year 2000, they've been going through this measurement of engagement. And what's kind of shocking about this is that if you look at the numbers, engagement in the US, engaged employees, people that are aligned with the vision and the mission of their business, and they feel like they're a part of the organization and that their work really matters, has never been higher. In the middle of a pandemic where we are all working from home, we've given up our physical workplaces for our personal workspaces, and yet somehow we are more engaged than we've ever been. And I think this actually speaks to the value, the critical value of the digital workplace and internal
Absolutely.
communications, and the importance of internal comms on driving engagement, right? So when we gave up our physical workplaces for our personal workspaces, the only workplace that we had in common was the digital workplace. And so the digital workplace has become, that space where we all come together. So that's become more important. That's become more valuable. I think it speaks volumes to the fact that, HR and internal comms jumped on this moment, provided a lot of clarity on, here's what's going to happen. Here's what we're going to do moving forward. Yes, we may not all be together physically, but we can all still be together virtually. It doesn't replace but it does, it's going to be the way that we're going to work. And so what we've seen on our side from an implementation standpoint is that internal communications and HR, and frankly even marketing and sales and all the different parts of the organization, IT included, have really come together to create a more vibrant digital workplace, and have sort of been enabled and empowered by the digital workplace. So this is kind of telling and informative about, I think, where we're going and the value of the digital workplace in driving engagement. And then now the opportunity that we have to leverage that to drive advocacy.
Yeah, and I think for me, one of the most telling things I've read recently is actually that after we moved to this hybrid model, a lot of people, as you mentioned, have been working from home. Disconnection levels, that connection with your peers, working around with people, was much higher. But
Hmm.
engagement levels, as you've shown here, have been rising. And it wasn't purely because of the pandemic. I think there was this mentality that people just worked because they felt like they had to. And of course, there were other factors happening in the background. But really, it was from how the corporations reacted and how organizations were able to to change the way that they engage with their employees. And
Absolutely.
we've seen that across the board. And I think that's very important. And that doesn't mean you have to, and I love the fact that you brought up marketing, sales, HR. There's many different teams that work together. This isn't a one team or one department goal. This is an organizational goal that has multiple facets to it that really all tie together. That's going to bring the engagement levels up. And of course, advocacy is there. When you have advocacy and people feel like they have something to share, that they want to continue and to bring out into the light, to the social and many other avenues,
Right.
you're going to see that engagement level. And you're also going to be able to understand where people are engaging at and what makes sense. So I think it brings a lot of valuable data to the organization, as well as it brings in opportunities for growth in sectors that you normally wouldn't see. On top of that, when you build that engagement and of course an enablement factor as well for your employees, you're going to see that really pulling, and you're also going to, in a longer mindset, you're going to be able to start to see retention levels start to grow, people being happiness coming back, giving a lot of opportunities, and you also start to understand what's being presented out there
Right.
in regards to what needs maybe you have not met, or where you really are being successful and you can grow further with. So
That's right.
it makes sense, and I think there's a lot of key factors to take away from this. And with enablement, and specifically with engagement and advocacy, you're just starting to see that across the board. I know when I log in every day, and one of the first things I do is go into LinkedIn and see what the people I've connected with and what my network has bubbled up, and what is going on.
Right.
And that's a very important thing, because I want to feel connected.
Anthony,
Yeah.
I'm just going to jump in because it's funny. I used to sort of detest looking at LinkedIn. I'll be very honest. I used to not like looking at LinkedIn because I felt like everybody's there to just sell me something, or just there to tell me that, something great that they did. But now it's like, okay, I don't have the coffee, I don't have the break room. I don't have the lunch room to be able to go to and kind of connect with people. And so
Exactly.
LinkedIn has been the way I do that. Twitter has also been the way that I do that. And obviously Microsoft Teams, where I can connect with my colleagues and my peers there. What's interesting is that I think social has obviously taken off for a variety of
Hmm.
reasons. But I think that we're starting to use that a lot more. And so there's an opportunity here, right? Where, as we already showed, your employees are very well connected. If you can drive better engagement, and which means, they're better aligned to the vision and the mission of the business and the organization, they see the value of their work in the work that they're doing, and the greater picture of where they fit into that organizational success, they're going to be more likely to talk about that. But there is one piece of this that we haven't talked about yet, Anthony, and I think it's sort of
Hmm.
the critical, the sort of linchpin, and that is the fact that, as I said earlier, it's not a spectator sport. You can't just
Right.
tell your employees, hey, there's a great article here, share it. You can't just send them an
Hmm.
email and say, like, send this out to your friends and family, and have them come and buy something. Right, because there's sort of the psychological piece to it too. So gamification is this really, really valuable tool, and it's been around for a while, and you can go out and look up gamification. We've been talking about gamification in the digital workplace for probably 4 or 5 years. But in this particular moment, especially around advocacy, this is one of the only gamification experiences that I've seen around advocacy in particular, and the value that it drives to help people sort of think about, you know, what content is available to them. So that's the it's not a spectator sport from the organizational perspective. You really need to be able to provide that information, and then incentivize your employees to come in and look at that content and see what's shareable, and what they can help to drive some of that content advocacy.
Yeah.
So Anthony, I'd love to see it. I think people at home would probably love to see it as well. Um, so let's see how is Powell sort of integrating that, and how do we make this less of a spectator sport and more of a contact sport between the employer and the employee.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think before we really get into sort of the sorry Before we get into the how, I did want to say a couple things in reference to gamification. I think gamification sort of become a little more obscured, and with the concept of gamification, a lot of people think, okay, animation, something, new graphics, colors, pop.
Right.
It doesn't have to be that, really. And I think that's where, sort of have this love it or hate it concept of gamification right now. It's either the best thing, but we're all in, or I don't even want to touch that. Well, really what it boils down to is the ability to rank and track that gives people a measure and a reason to engage and to advocate something. And you see that, and we've seen that model proven across the board with things. You've mentioned Twitter, you've mentioned, Instagram. There's nothing better than getting those likes than giving your opinion to something. And that can be translated to the business model. And it's important though that it doesn't mean you have to. It doesn't mean there's a lot of bells and whistles and colors and everything along those lines. It just means that you're engaging and you're allowing people to have more of an understanding and a say into what they are advocating, and to also be able to track that as a measuring for both the organization and employees, which can be more fun. We all know competition and competitiveness drives a lot of what we do.
Yeah.
With that being said, I'd love to absolutely jump into what we have here at Powell. Give me just one moment here. Okay, so if you're able to see my screen, what we have here now is our personal Powell Intranet offering. So for Powell 365, there's two pillars, Powell Intranet and Powell Teams. We're going to show both today in the reference to the employee advocacy. So what we have here is the employee advocacy intranet portal. So when you go in, first thing you're going to see is you're able to share very easily to your Facebook, your Twitter, or your LinkedIn accounts. With that, you're actually measured with achievements and you're given points earned. And with the points, you then can track those, go to the leaderboard, and I'll show you in just a moment, you're gonna be able to see where you measure up against either your group, the whole organization, and how you're doing as far as advocating and what you are advocating to which social. Down below, we can also see what is being added the most. So that's where the organization and even employees can also start to understand, well, why is this being shared the most? And I agree, this should be shared throughout. If we go up, very easily, people on this page are able to go through, suggest a link. In this case, they could add in a public URL. We do all the translation for you to whatever language necessary. And also they could add a document. This then goes to whoever is your content owner or approver, and they're able to go through and see what they think should be curated and bubbled up. But in this case, we could, from our device, very easily go through and add in a document, translate, whatever we may need to do. And then if you are the owner, you can curate that content. And so you have a very easy portal to go through, see what's been recommended, approve that, and then have that available for other people to be able to share or obviously digest. And then with the leaderboard, we can go through, and this is where you're going to see that piece of the ranking and understanding of who on your team, who in your department, who in your business unit you're matched up against, and who's sharing the most. And that's going to really bring in that advocacy.
This is awesome, right? Because this isn't now. So this is where it stops being a spectator sport, and you start to see a little bit more about who else in the organization is sharing, and you got that a little bit of competitiveness, right? Which is kind of cool.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I love about this, Anthony, and maybe you could just talk about this really quickly, the fact that we're on the intranet, right? We're still in a secure environment, you're sharing out to Facebook and you're sharing out to Twitter and you're sharing out to LinkedIn, which are these public places, right? So the content that you're sharing is not necessarily just all of your SharePoint content, right?
No, that's a great point to bring up. This is not just sharing what's on SharePoint. This is obviously an intranet, but you can pull in external resources as well as have user-created content. You don't want this to be purely, as you mentioned, as a spectator sport of sorts. You don't want just comms or marketing information here. You want people to also feel like they're able to upload and share their own content, and that comes down to the ability to be able to curate. So, and you don't have to. One of the best parts of this, you do not have to actually have it approved from just one level. You could have multiple champions or owners of specific groups. So that way you're able to curate and get that information out there as needed. And then people have a much more focused understanding and relevant information for what they would want to see, so that you're not necessarily doing just a huge amount of news, a huge amount of content for every single person who logs in.
Hey, and I just want to extend this out to everyone, that if you've got questions about what you're seeing here, just want to understand a little bit more, you want to dig into one particular thing, please feel free to just make your comments or questions right in the chat window. Kayla is going to be monitoring that, and she'll bring them to our attention as we go through this.
Yeah, absolutely. And another great piece to bring up, and a lot of times what we hear from on our side at Powell is that people say, okay, we have an intranet, we have this built out, but people are really living on Teams. Our employee base goes to Teams and they use that, and that's becoming their de facto intranet. And we know that that is not yet the case. Teams, a lot of people want to make it their intranet, and obviously that's where they spend the majority of their day, but it is not yet. And that's why for Powell 365, the two pillars are Powell Teams and Powell Intranet. So if we think about translating and taking what we've just seen here and bringing it to the team side, with Powell Teams, you get a couple of quick ways to do that. So first thing is you can create, you're able to easily create a team that you've dictated as the organization, and you can assign all the things that we've shown into that team, so that you don't have to train and explain to someone how to bring in that impactful and great data and those portals into your team. It's all ready to go. And the way that would look, if we think about it, so if we have a team, and then we're looking at the, so we've brought in all of these concepts with advocacy and engagement. So when we go to the team that's now been created, first thing we get is we simply have a way for people to go through, post things that they want to have the link, they want to upload, they want to share. With the employee advocacy, we can simply click over, and now we've brought in the intranet page itself. So you're not telling people to go to SharePoint and then go back to Teams. It's all in a relevant.
This is so important, and it's so important because we know that 80 or 90% of the workforce is sitting in teams, working in teams, talking to people, collaborating. Then what I like to think about the intranet as the place where you're enabling and empowering people with the value and the mission of the business, and Teams is where you're collaborating and putting those values and mission to work. And so being able to bring that in here is so important. From an advocacy perspective, it's also really important because it's right there. It's where they are. So you're eliminating a barrier, right? You're creating a much better experience for the end user by eliminating that barrier of having to go to another place and log in somewhere else. They're already here. They're already logged in. It's just a click away.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and many times it's how do we get people to leverage our intranet? How do we get people to go to our intranet portal? And to change someone's process, you have a very small window to do that. People are going to do what makes sense. What you have to do, and you see this across the board with many of the other portals and many other social media even, things you work with, and think about your phone. If it makes sense and it's easy to do, you will adopt. So if people use Teams, bring the portal, bring the information to Teams. So we have the employee advocacy portal here, obviously, but also we have Power BI. We can bring in reports. We can bring in that relevant information. So we've talked about pulling in that data point from what are people sharing and what's being leveraged, how our market's referencing data. Now
this
we
is
can
the marketer's dream, just so you know.
Right.
I from a marketing perspective, just being able to see what content is being shared and where it's being shared and the value of that content enables now communications and marketing teams to say, hey, this is the content we should be focusing on. We're going to put more energy and resources. So we're able to target our limited amount of time and energy and resource on the things that are going to drive the most value.
And once again,
this is great. I love this.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you have the piece to make it easier to do the actual sharing and to leverage the portal, but now you also have it easy to bring in that Power BI data, and then you can use your posts, and you have it all in Teams, because what are you going to do with that Power BI data and work with your team with on Microsoft Teams? So we brought all that together. And then we have some other channels just to quickly show. So for best practices, we can have something easily leveraged. And then we also have LinkedIn articles, so we can go in and see where that's being shared, recommendations, anything along those lines. Now, this is how we've envisioned this, but of course you can change around as needed. And because you've now embedded this in a template and people can easily spin this up, you don't have to explain to people how to add a leaderboard, what URL to go to, where does this live in SharePoint. They're just able to click through and see how, and then it immediately comes up, and you're not asking them to completely change their day-to-day. You're just adding value to the processes they've already built up. So you've impacted the culture without asking them to change their culture. So
what I love about there's so many things I love about this, but one of the things I love about this is that you created an employee experience not only for the end users, the employees that are going out and sharing content, but you've created an amazingly good experience for the folks that own this content that are trying to push this out. One thing that we hear a lot from our customers on is, I've got this content. People are getting bombarded with messages in Teams, but they're also getting bombarded with messages in email. Email is like, people are overwhelmed, right? So now Teams is the place to go for content and information, and they can search for it, right? So you've got search on top, you've got search inside the intranet that is much more valuable. And we're not going to go into the search functionality of the intranet today, but it is super awesome and way more powerful than the out-of-the-box SharePoint search. But when you're an internal comms person or you're a marketing person or even HR person, you want to kind of get people talking about, maybe there's an opening, a job opening that you want to share out there, and you want to get, the best possible candidates, especially now that you don't have to hire somebody that's going to be in the office. They could be anywhere, right? You've just opened up your pool of possible candidates to really the world. But you want to get that message out there. You can send a message out to your entire organization within Teams and link it back to that content and say, share this. And it's a very specific thing. So you can actually target the messages to very specific parts. Maybe you want to target sales and say, hey, sales, here's a great article that, we think is going to drive some lead generation. Or maybe it's to your customer service folks, right? And say, hey, here's an article about, we just released a new version of our software that's going to make everyone's lives easier. Go share this information out to all of the people that you're connected with. So there's a lot of use cases that, I could go on and on. There's so many use cases for this. I get excited about it from a marketing perspective. I get really excited about it from a digital workplace perspective as well.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to leveraging the tools and the power you have in your current workforce. So when you think about it, like, and you mentioned that, when I think about my last 3-4 opportunities and where I've worked, it's all been through lead generation and sharing and seeing what's out there and asking people. You have these networks now, we used to have this village mentality, but we've really opened that up, and you're able to reach out and see things you normally wouldn't be able to. And you just mentioned the fact that, yes, now you're not even limited to having to work only within the realm that you and company, that you live. So now you can work, you could be in one place and you could be working, in a different area of the country technically. And so it leads to a lot of challenges, but it leads to a lot of opportunities too. And I think it comes down to simplicity and creating relevant, impactful content. Of course, you have your marketing, communications, HR teams to do that, but then also making it easy and streamlined to share that out. If within 2-3 clicks, like we've shown here today, you can share that there's an opportunity available to LinkedIn, to Facebook, whatever it may be, that news just came out, that there's something that the company wants to have put out there through social, it makes it a lot easier for the employee to make that split-second decision.
Yep.
If you make it complicated or if it doesn't seem like impactful, you're not going to get that. And totally. Before we go on, I did see a question from Patrick that I wanted to answer real quickly. So this is all included with the normal Powell internet licensing. So anything we add is not monetized. If you have questions around that, we do have the Learning Center. With the Learning Center, you would be able to get any new information, see our roadmap, any new adding additions we've done. Recently, you may have seen we've had onboarding as well as a previous addition to our templates. But if you go into your Powell Manager offering, or if you reach out to any of your customer satisfaction managers, they'd be able to walk you through that. So
Anthony,
Absolutely available to you. But
one of the things I would love to that's a good question, Patrick. One of the things I'd love to touch on, just as we're sort of rounding things out here, we kind of grazed on it, but the idea of content curation is really, really important, right? Because again, not everything has to be shareable, not everything should be shared. And so the
absolutely.
idea that from a brand management perspective, you can actually kind of control that messaging that's being shared. So the ability for, say, HR and comms and marketing and sales and even IT to be able to curate specific content that they
Yeah.
want shared, whether it's internal content from within the organization or maybe third-party content, right? That's out there that's talking about their product or the industry. But maybe you could talk a little bit about that process. I think you talked about it a little bit early on, but I'd love to just get into it a little bit more.
Yeah, the curation aspect.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the fact that it's not just marketing and comms pushing content out, but the employees can actually make recommendations, I think, right?
No, absolutely. So if we go back, and I'm going to work from Teams now, but once again, this is pulling from internet. But if we work from the advocacy page, you're absolutely right, and that's really important. You don't want people to think that they're just sharing what the organization wants to be shared.
Right.
You want them to also have a piece of that, right? If you have a piece of the pie, you're going to be more interested, and a more engaged employee is going to be feel more enabled, as well as they typically are the ones that you're going to see working a little harder, getting more involved, bringing more value back to the company than themselves. So you're absolutely right. And what we're going to see, sorry, I just have to move this very quickly, but what we're going to see is the ability to actually curate that. So when you suggest, you would have approvers, and typically you would have champions that would be approving that. That can be within a specific group, it could be departmental, however you want to do that. You can do that using SharePoint or any other avenue you have built out to give permissions. But when you're able to actually curate that, so now when I want to, I see this, I see the virtual coffee machine, which is an ability that another ability of Powell 365 that allows you to be able to sort of feel connected and have quick pop-up drinks and coffee and talk with people around. I could share this, or if I felt like I had something, oh, this is interesting, but I really would like to, I think this link is better, I think this information is better, I can suggest that. Now, that doesn't mean that's going to go out to everyone, because of course we wouldn't want that. There needs to be some type of security practice in line. So you have your curation there. You'd be able to do that or suggest a document, and then you can bubble that up. And then you could also simply post it. So we have that avenue, but let's say someone who's like, I just want to use Teams. I'm comfortable with that. I know that. I can make a conversation, recommend something there, and then I still have the same curation process that can be followed. And then you can also use things like Power
So
Automate.
Anthony, I'm going to slow you down for a second because this
Yeah.
is interesting to me. So let's say I'm an employee, I come across an industry article that I think is really interesting and I think should be shareable or should bring it to the attention of the folks that are curating this content. I can actually take that link, bring it in through Teams and make the recommendation or suggestion. Maybe it's like a suggestion box from within Teams.
Absolutely. And I'll even
That's
take it
awesome.
one step further. Yeah, it really is. You can use things like Power Automate and Flow to actually be able to, if somebody, let's say, went through and used the intranet, we could also use that to just automatically hand off and create the post. What you're seeing here was
Brilliant.
actually automatically created. So that way, when you have your person curating working in Teams, they don't have to go to two different portals to figure out what people are doing, because you don't want it to just be in the intranet. So that way you can have the person who's curating, they're familiar with Teams, they could have everything that's posted through the intranet automatically post here, and they can have that flow set up where they can approve it, have it posted, and all done through Teams.
It's awesome.
So this just gives you a couple of ways to meet the criteria and to enable people to do the work the way they want to. So absolutely, and I agree. And that's just really the way to extend what you already have and make it, once again, easier, adding value and making the simplicity so streamlined that people really don't have anything they can complain about or have any concerns over, because it just makes sense.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I'm just quickly see if we have any other questions. Okay, looks like they just asked, someone asked if we had if this was going to be recorded and they could share this. Absolutely, just so everybody knows, this is something that we'll make available for anybody and they'll be able to share out. Please let us know if you have any questions. And I'm going to quickly just pull back up. We have one more slide here.
So just sort of to kind of maybe summarize it before we get into this last slide. I mean, as someone who sort of straddles the line between the employee experience and the customer experience, and recognizes and understands the importance of enabling and empowering your employees to help drive that engagement with your customers, this is such a powerful tool that is, frankly, it's part of the whole Powell internet package, right? Which is amazing. You guys are, you know, it's not an add-on, right? This is just integrated directly in, and it's so integrated, in fact, that, you know, from within teams, you're able to do these recommendations or suggestions around links to content that might be external. I mean, there's so much about this that is focused on just that, empowering and enabling your employees. And this is where we started off by talking about engagement and the importance of engagement, because advocacy is a function of that, right? A more engaged employee is going to be a more productive employee, is going to be an employee that thinks like a boss and acts like a boss, and is continually thinking about their work in the context of, you know, the broader work of the organization. So I'm floored by this this new functionality and the fact that gamification helps to drive that behavior, right? Psychologically, it's really about driving behavior. And so, you know, we're pulling all these pieces together, and I'll let you walk through this. This is a great slide too, right? I love how this sort of ties all these pieces together.
Yeah, I love the concept of the unleashing the employee advocacy. And going back to Powell 365, yeah, one thing we love at Powell is we're always focused on being very feedback oriented. And what do our customers need, whether that's and what are people who are just starting their intranet, SharePoint experience and life cycle, what do they need versus somebody who's mature and has, you know, 50,000, 100,000 users that are taking this in? How do we focus on them and make sure that we're able to hit people no matter where they are in their journey? And anything we add, any new features such as this, and any new templates, web parts, on the team side, anything we build out are never monetized, and we always look for that feedback element of what people are expecting. So of course, with COVID, we've had a couple of things we've released, and this is the most recent, where we're really focusing on how we can make people, the enablement and the engagement, of course, advocacy being a part of that, for our customers, our customers' employee base, and keep them involved, because intranet and just communication and collaboration between the organization and the employees are no longer the static thing where you just do it once and here you go, and like you said, expect you to start here's some stuff. No, it evolves, it's growth, it's going to change. This year we'll have new challenges and new things that will be brought to light, and you need a quick way to be able to share that with people, make people knowledgeable, bring visibility, but also keep them involved and feel like they have a piece of it so that they're also engaging continuously. So the challenge that we're really excited, and it makes me excited to really work with our customer base and bring people in on that journey so they can understand how we make that easier, and we will continue to innovate and along those lines as we continue on. But yeah, with this last slide, and I won't go through each piece because we've had it for a little while now, but it really is just, what are the employees' expectations versus what Powell's employee advocacy delivers? And so really when you want, and I'll pull out just a couple that I love, you want them to feel engaged, and I love this word, recognize. I want to be recognized for what I've done. You know, we all go back, we have our reviews, we talk, we know, you don't want to work in a silo, you want to feel like you're being recognized and people understand the effort you've put forth. And we've done that through the ranking systems and the ability to sort of see how you stack up and what you're doing compared to the rest of your peers. How do you make it fun and keep people enthusiastic to continue doing it? That's the streamlining approach, and making it playful and being able to click through and see and not have to feel like you're being forced to do anything, and really engaging with your employees. And then the last piece, and you brought this up a couple times, I'm going to say it again because it's so important, allowing people to suggest their own content. Why is Instagram, why is Facebook, why is LinkedIn so popular? Because people bring in their own content. And 9 out of 10 times, that's the content that other employees are going to want to engage with. Yeah. And when people have a reason to go and seek that out, they're going to get that information as well as your own. And that's where you're really going to see the adoption and the value present itself. So with that, I think that's just a great example of how Powell 365 really thinks that they're able to harness and bring light and some enablement to this challenge that we're seeing, and keeping people engaged and really pulling in that advocacy from both sides. And once again, it's not a spectator sport, it's mutual. So completely agree with you there.
Do we have any questions, or is anyone, just before we wrap this up, we're happy to take some questions now about this, about engagement in general, about the intranet and Teams.
Yeah, so this is Kayla here. Thank you, gentlemen. This has
Voice
been
of
such
God.
a wonderful. I know, coming in. Again, this conversation about what our future of work looks like with employee engagement and advocacy. So we do have a couple questions surrounding that. So do we see this, such as the demo, being something which communications who normally are just interested in posting content to their users will be on board with? Because this does effectively change what the intranet has been traditionally used for.
Can you ask that question one more time? I just want to make sure I understand the question.
So let me try to rephrase it. So traditionally with an intranet, we find a piece of content and we share it to our audience, our existing audience. Do we think employees would be on board with that? Because it does effectively change how we have used an intranet in the past.
So okay, go ahead, Anthony, go ahead.
No, please.
I'll just tell you this. This is just from my own personal perspective, sorry. I've worked with a lot of organizations implementing the intranet, so I can tell you with certainty that the organizations are looking for this, large ones and even smaller ones, but employees are too, right? Employees want to feel connected to the work that they're doing. I think number one, I think engagement is one of those pieces that again, it's not a spectator sport. Employees want to be engaged in their work. They want to feel aligned with the vision and the mission of the business, and they want to feel like their work matters. So when you give them the opportunity to say, hey, this is something you can share about your personal work that is relevant, or I'm sorry, about the organization that is relevant to your personal work, to the things that you're doing, they may not want to share everything that you're putting out there, but the idea is that you're, from an organizational perspective, if you're curating content that sort of ties together the whole story, something in there is going to relate to the work that your employees are doing, and they're going to feel compelled to say like, oh, this is cool, I want to be able to share that, I want people to see that this is what I'm doing, right? So it's a cycle of it's a full circle, right, of advocacy driving engagement and engagement driving advocacy. The more that you can provide them with the opportunities to share the content that is relevant, that showcases their relevance in the work that the business is doing, the more likely they're gonna want to share that, and the more likely they're gonna feel pride in that work and feel more engaged in it, and they're gonna likely to share it more. So yes, absolutely, this is something that I think employees want. I think it's something that organizations should want and should be taken advantage of.
That's incredibly helpful, Eric. Thank you. Go ahead, Anthony. Feel free to add to that if you'd like.
I was just going to say, very well said, Eric. And I look out at it as the concept of an internet, I think these days changes almost daily. And one of the main factors that, and Eric's absolutely right, we do see that with our customer base and with people are asking for, they absolutely want it. The main factor, I think, is just how it's presented and where the curation takes place. You still have to have a hold and an understanding of what is being shared. But whereas, the older, I think, document repository, just getting bits of news and information out there, concept of an intranet has really changed and progressed and evolved. And with what we're seeing with current apps for internet and people who are migrating and moving over to SharePoint Online and doing different variations of that solutions and bringing in their Salesforce and their Dynamics and their Slack and Teams and all of the great stuff, is you can't have a silo of an internet anymore. You have to allow people to share what's important to them to the internet, because that's going to keep them engaging in it. And if you have an internet that no one's engaging in, you're not doing the internet's not doing the work that you need it to do.
I think that's an incredibly strong point to really wrap up our conversation as well. There is one other question that's been asked a few times in a few different ways that I'd love to ask both of you. What do both of you see as the primary business challenges for 2021? And how do you feel as if gamification will address that? And Eric, let's go ahead and start with you on this one.
That's a really big question.
It is, yeah.
Please, Eric. Please, Eric.
Our audience is very curious. It's been asked a couple of times, so feel free.
Yeah. So look, again, I think the big challenge of 2021 and frankly beyond is going to be, how do you keep people engaged? I actually did a webinar about this probably 2 years ago, around the fact that we are better and more connected than we've ever been at any point in the history of mankind, right? We are better and more connected to our people, to our work, to our files, to our documents. We're better connected to, our friends and our neighbors. I mean, we've just never been more connected at any point in the history of mankind. And yet engagement continues to be so low. I think what's really interesting about this particular moment is that I think we've tipped the scale on connectivity and engagement. We've started to see that connectivity can drive engagement. But again, it's not a spectator sport. You can't just give people the tools to be connected. You can't just tell them, okay, here's Teams, go use it and talk to each other and start working and getting the work of the business done. That's not the way it works, right? You have to provide the tools, but you also have to provide it's not just the venue. You have to provide the venue, and you have to provide the training, you have to provide the structure, you have to provide the content and the information. And that's where, when we start working together, whether you're comms or you're IT, you're in legal or you're in customer service or you're in HR or whatever, all of these pieces have to work together. So gamification for me is about helping to drive some of that behavior, right? Helping to engage folks. And look, I'll be really honest with you, not everyone's going to like it, right? Not everyone is driven by gamification, and that's just the reality, right? But it's going to help drive engagement with that subset of folks that maybe are less likely to feel connected, are less likely to feel engaged just by being connected. So that's the piece that I think has been missing, and I think for a lot of organizations, gamification means helping to engage those folks where connectivity is not enough. I think for the vast majority of us, we've got our devices, we've got all of our connected devices. I've got my phone sitting right here next to me, even though I'm on this screen here. I'm on my laptop here. I've got my tablet. I can go anywhere. I can be connected. But for some folks, I think connectivity is not enough, and just because we're better and more connected does not necessarily mean we're better and more engaged. This, I think, helps tip the scales in terms of helping to drive that engagement. And as we said before, a more engaged employee is a more productive employee, is an employee that sees their value in the business of the business.
Absolutely. You said almost everything. I mean, I would sum it up very simply and say, for organizations going into 2021, and things I say to anybody I work with and who goes on the journey for things with Powell 365 is, you don't focus on boiling the ocean. What's really a good thing to do is take tendencies and habits that have already built out. In this case, advocacy. He just mentioned that all the devices. People know what to do. They do it with other tools that they've been doing for a lot longer. Tap into that, harness the value that's already been set and created, and apply that to things that are goals and initiatives in your company. So in this case, bringing in talent, creating leads, getting news out, bringing visibility to things. These are all things that are initiatives from the organizational mindset. So instead of following just the normal day-to-day, just put out the way you're doing it now mentality, why not use these already built structures and tap into that? And you're not doing as much work on your end. You're not recreating the wheel, but you are getting value and you're getting impactful data from that you can follow and continue to evolve as you go along.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. Hopefully that answers that question. That's a tough question to answer.
It is a tough question, but
Yeah.
I think both of you handled it with ease. I think it's safe to say that gamification satisfies the fundamental human desires that we have. So I think it's a good point for us to conclude our event today. So a big thank you to everyone who has spent their time with us. Thank you to Eric for joining Powell Software today. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you.
Thanks for having me, guys. Always fun.